Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, January 27th, 2022. Time for another show. We set off this morning with, a news landscape, at least slightly different from yesterday's. That's good. Change is good. Moving forward is good. Justice Stephen Breyer announced his upcoming retirement. I guess if I read correctly, I actually didn't read too deeply into it. Everyone else was too busy doing that. There was no room left in the world for discussion of the Breyer retirement. But it sounds like he's giving himself a couple of months to wrap things up and going to leave the court in the next 6 months or so, which I guess has prompted Senator Feinstein to say, I don't understand the rush. What's the rush in trying to replace him quickly? Of course, part of the issue probably is everybody gets a little bit nervous with a 50-50 Senate, with Republicans already having taken a dominant position on the court because they are nominating so many ideological actors, and of course the fact that the mainstream press is setting the table for the upcoming battle, if that's what it is, by disarming ahead of time and saying, well, we have to remember we want to appoint someone just like Justice Breyer who realizes that you really should be apolitical at the court. And yeah, sure, it should be the case. If everyone else was, it would be a wise decision, I suppose, to avoid any ideological considerations whatsoever in choosing your jurist. And you might even be able to get away with making it look like you're doing that and still get the job done and provide some countervailing weight on the court to the 6-3, and you'll still be preserving a 6-3 conservative majority. Unless, of course, you expand the court. I've seen a couple of ideas floated, including the idea that, hey, we're replacing an 84-year-old Supreme Court justice. What's the big deal? Why not? We'll just do it. We're going to just do it by the numbers, right? Why don't we, instead of one 84-year-old Supreme Court justice, replace him with 4 21-year-old Supreme Court justices? We're just going by the numbers. I'll see if I can get the Ohio redistricting team on board for that one. Remember that one? The other day we were just reading that story about they got their district struck down, of course, which was nice. That was nice to see from the Ohio Supreme Court. But they were the guys with the idea that although the Ohio redistricting statute said you had to redistrict with the statewide balance of voter preferences in mind and try and mirror that they had said, all right, well, the way we measure it was that Republicans had won 80% of statewide elections over the past 10 years for the various statewide positions that were contested, and so therefore they were entitled to 80% of the state legislature as well. Pretty amazing. Anyway, gosh, there's an awful lot to catch up on. I'm sure we'll talk about the Breyer nomination, or rather the Breyer resignation, and the big names in play for replacing this justice. There's much more to catch up on. Other stories out there, including more, burgeoning censorship stories. Lots of attention paid, and rightly so. Perhaps we'll address it later on. I don't know, unless it's one of Greg's favorite topics. But a big controversy on the internets last night as one of the school boards, I don't know if it's a local school board in Tennessee, taking upon itself to ban the Holocaust-themed graphic novel, Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel, by the way, Mouse, from the curriculum, allegedly on the grounds that at some point one of the characters, as they say during the discussion, uses the GD word, the goddamn, they say. And of course, it's a cuss word, and we can't have that. And so therefore, this whole curriculum module, as they call it, around teaching the Holocaust to 7th, 8th graders or high school students even, all out the window now because there's the GD word in it. So, gosh, there's a lot to discuss in that too, but it might not be a favorite topic or on the top of your list. Greg, well, let's take a look at that list and welcome you in. Good morning. How's it going?
Good morning. It certainly deserves to be on the list. I think there was a mayor who was trying to ban LGBT books because he's a Christian.
Well, I think we should get rid of all of those letters in every book because, I don't want kids putting that combination together themselves.
And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have, a decent Supreme Court, which we don't. But, that's what Stephen Breyer does represent. It was interesting because I saw a lot of legal commenters and commentators and pundits and regular old lawyers who I follow on Twitter. And a couple of them had put together here are the great liberal justices of my lifetime ranked.
Oh. Yeah.
And John Paul Stevens was at the top of everybody's list, and a couple had Ruth Bader Ginsburg down at like 3 or 4.
Oh.
I asked why.
Yes, why?
And they said, well, her life work is fantastic, but she didn't do what Breyer did, so she screwed us, so she gets dropped down. And I said, well, isn't that like victim blaming? And they said, well, this is her job. She's supposed to think about things like that.
Wow. All right. Well, whatever, man. That's an
what
odd
I said.
ranking.
She's my icon, but I get where they're coming from. And so what I'm saying is that it highlights the importance of Breyer stepping down. Now, what I don't get, you brought up the idea of simply replacing him with 4 21-year-olds. You may remember that young British girl who pointed out that Prime Minister Boris Johnson was naughty and had to go to the naughty center to apologize.
I love the term.
And I don't understand why they don't just, appoint a 12-year-old and get 70 years out of him.
Right. I mean, that one was pretty bright. There are a number of...
She'd be great.
Yeah. Well,
She'd be better than some of the justices we have now.
True. That would work.
And you don't have to be a lawyer, and you don't have to be a judge.
And I don't know why you would limit yourself to one. I mean, if you're going down to 12 years old, you can appoint 8 of them and still not exceed the 84 years of Justice Breyer. I'm going by age, you see, and I want to put the same number of years on the bench.
What makes you able to do that? And the answer is, well, if you have the votes, you can do it.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Sure.
So that raises some very interesting procedural points here about how we go forward. Yes, there are extremely competent black women who are being bandied about in terms of candidates to replace.
Stop bandying women, please.
Stephen Breyer, and Anita Hill is my favorite, but there's many others.
Oh, all right.
Because if you go with Anita Hill, you get one of the justices to automatically retire.
Maybe, yeah, or else. Well, I hope he wouldn't. I don't think he has the energy to make her life miserable at this point. But okay,
right. But anyway, serious.
It's interesting.
She's qualified, but serious. Serious candidates are not hard to find. Qualified candidates are not hard to find.
Well, no.
You know that, and this is an important point I want to make here, which not only goes to the Breyer discussion and who replaces him, but many, many other things. Very insightful comment. That's SIGHT, not CITE. Insightful comment by Samuel Perry, who is a sociologist who follows religion. And he says, here's how dog whistles work. If I say X is an A, knowing my target audience also happens to think A and B are equal.
Is this algebra? Yeah.
Yeah, it is algebra. So if I say X is A, then you hear X is B. Right? How does this work? Well, if Marjorie Taylor Greene says whoever they pick is a socialist.
All right.
And your Christian audience, also your white Christian audience, also thinks socialists are CRT-loving atheists.
Well,
then if she says Dave is a socialist, you hear Dave is a racial and religious threat.
Right, I guess.
That's how dog whistles work. You don't hear it, but they hear it, and they totally understand it. And here you see, he says, the keys for a good dog whistle are culturally specific knowledge about listeners plus plausible deniability. You're talking economics and socialists and socialism. They hear racial and religious threat. So it's like Lee Atwater. You can't say the N-word, so you talk about states' rights and forced busing.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. So you're already going to hear, I mean, there's a big story in the Washington Post today. Republicans haven't figured out who Biden's going to nominate, but they've already decided they're radicals.
Yes, well, that's always their game.
It's always their game, but, they're going to be called socialists, which is going to be telling their audience, well, we know about socialists.
Yeah.
They're a racial and religious threat.
Right.
And that's especially true if it turns out it's a black woman. And so they can't say we don't want her because she's a black woman, but they can say we don't want her because she's a socialist. So, I'm just prepping you for looking for that.
Okay. I mean, it's well worth pointing out, even if it wasn't a dog whistle mechanism.
I mean, it's too obvious to
ridiculous.
say that, all right, but this is what's going on, folks.
Yeah. I mean, you can. That's a good point, right? That a judge who will have, in all likelihood, never said anything whatsoever about planned economics, right? Is going to be
right.
Yeah. Is really going. They're really going to say that person is a socialist. And now, okay. Now, based on what? Now, if you had a politician, at least they were setting policy. You could say socialistic in their approach to public policy, but largely impossible for judges, but doesn't matter, and that's the whole point.
The other side of the coin is that whoever you think, whoever one out there thinks, still might be classified as a so-called Republican moderate, be it Mitt Romney or Susan Collins or somebody else, or Tom Tillis. Watch their language and see what they say.
All right.
Because when Marjorie Taylor Greene says socialist, you just dismiss it because she's an idiot. Who cares? Right. But let's watch the language for the so-called moderates and see what they're saying. Because they're going to oppose it.
Yeah.
And the question is on what grounds.
Right. So will they go with the socialist, the easy thing that I just read from Marjorie Taylor Greene, which will tell you a little bit about how moderate they are? Or something
are they using a dog whistle that we now understand, or are they using something else? Right? So, again, now you have this opening, and so the process comes up. Process guy.
Oh.
Because I was waiting to call in to say, all right, I got process questions for you.
All right, I thought we were going to talk about cartoons all day, but okay, yes.
All right, so here's some of them have answers already, and they're interesting.
Oh, good.
And some I'm not totally sure of. So here's one that has an answer.
All right.
So Breyer says he's retiring.
Okay, I agree.
All right.
I won that one. What else?
Can the Senate process a nomination if he's not retired yet? Because it's not vacant.
Yes.
And the answer is yeah,
sure.
because they've done it.
Yeah, that's right. They have. There's no problem with that.
Kim points out in the Washington Post, the recent precedent was the confirmation of Justin Walker to the U.S. Court of Appeals in 2020. He replaced former Judge Thomas Griffith, who didn't formally retire until September 2020. But he announced his intention to do much earlier than that, and Trump nominated Walker, who was a protege of McConnell, in the spring and confirmed him in June, long before Griffith retired. And then he was installed after Griffith stepped down. So
that's an interesting, definitely a great historical footnote. I mean, there's really no reason why they couldn't do it. They just can't put them on the bench, although we could tinker with that a little bit. But it brings up an interesting possibility. What if I decided, let's confirm, let's do it, I said. Let's confirm 4 justices to the Supreme Court. And then we'll bicker about whether or not there are slots for them later.
Well, contingent is the next question. So this one I don't totally have an answer to yet.
That's some good constitutional hardball there. I just didn't think that. All right.
I think it was Sandra Day O'Connor who said, I'll retire when you get somebody.
Yes. Okay,
and they went through like 3 or 4 people before they got somebody, which didn't leave the seat open.
Right. You can do
so
that too.
Is Stephen Breyer retiring based on the confirmation of somebody, or is he just retiring regardless?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'd look at his letter. If he
I'm not sure. So,
maybe he hasn't
and I haven't seen the letter. So that's one of the questions that's going to be on the table.
Yeah.
So then, and this is why all these process questions are interesting. So then, let's say whatever the circumstances, you still have to go ahead and can go ahead. He's still sitting, but you still can go ahead and have to go ahead with the Judiciary Committee, despite whatever Dianne Feinstein thinks. And how is that specific committee made up? And what are their rules in regard to how the Republicans can block stuff. The reason I ask is because Sarah Binder pointed out that when Amy Coney Barrett came up, the Democrats are very unhappy with the railroading, so they boycotted the committee.
Yeah.
And at that time, at least, the Judiciary Committee rules said you need 2 minority members there to do any business.
Yeah.
And the Republicans said, well, we're just going to confirm her anyway, and who's going to enforce those rules? Us.
That is a good point, yes.
Right?
Right.
So then it got through committee, and it went to the floor, and they followed the Senate rules, which are different in some respects, I suppose, than the committee rules. Mm-hmm. And so everything was standard in terms of how Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed. And so they said, well, we followed standard Senate procedure.
Right.
We didn't follow committee procedure, but we followed standard procedure. Now, it turns out, whether the committee does anything or not, what if the Republicans don't show up? You have a 50-50 committee. I didn't look up how that particular committee works or whether that's still the rule. And what if it doesn't get out of committee? The Senate could still vote on it.
It can, yes.
So some of the things that Republicans can do to block won't work, assuming, big assumption, that Senate Manchin's okay with it. Yeah.
We don't want rules broken, except for the ones that we broke before.
Right. So that's why it gets so complicated, and why it's not simply, well, Biden will nominate somebody and then it gets confirmed because the Democrats are in the majority, and yes, Dianne Feinstein, we're in a hurry because somebody else might die and something else may happen, and it may be you. And so we have to get this in before, while we have a 50-49. So you asked a blunt question. I'm telling you a blunt answer.
Right. I mean, wow. But that's true. That would be really an extraordinary conversation to have with her and say, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic.
We're trying to do this.
Could die at any moment. Okay. And, the odds of another justice dying in the middle of the procedure.
Not worried about the justices, Senator.
Talking about you. Wow. That's right.
What kind of statement is that for her to make?
It's a bad one.
It's a bad one, and I'm just trying to point out with a little bit of over the edge, over the top stuff, why it's bad.
Holy mackerel! Yeah, no, it'd be a very uncomfortable moment if you're a friend of Dianne Feinstein. But if you're a casual observer from the outside, it's worth pointing out. Don't tempt fate. If you have the opportunity to lock in a good nominee and get it done, do it. I mean, what else are you doing? Honestly, nothing else going on for you personally. I mean, what's the rush? I don't know what's the point of anything that you're doing. Just someone has retired and we need a replacement, and it's a big deal. Go do it.
And it's a big deal. And by the way, the Supreme Court has a whole bunch of stuff on their plate, and the makeup of the Supreme Court is kind of important, and all of this stuff matters, and that's why we elected you. And it's going to be an election year in 2022, and it's going to be an election issue in 2022 and especially 2024. So all of this matters. And what is wrong with you?
I don't know. She loves, I would say she loves being contrarian, but I don't know. She's just.
That's a different contrarian than Senate Manchin.
Yeah, so, that's just.
But anyway, all that process
whatever.
Certainly matters. And the point I'm trying to make is that once Biden nominates somebody, which he can do, and then sends it to committee, which he can do, the committee probably is not going to have an issue with confirming or recommending somebody for confirmation. But even if they do, it could still go to the floor.
Yeah.
The floor could still do this, but none of this is simple.
It's not easy, and that's why you want to start early and get the job done. And depending on what Breyer's letter says, I suppose she'd have a better point if Breyer's retirement was, like you said, contingent on having confirmed a replacement, and they might say, well, what's the rush? But then, he could die, you could die, any number of other people could die. Too many people are dying from the coronavirus pandemic as it is, and the current Supreme Court doesn't seem to care. Any number of things that are good reasons to rush.
Somebody found this old anecdote. This is back in 1994, and it turns out Bill Clinton and Stephen Breyer are out for a jog.
Okay.
And the media's jogging with them so that they could ask questions.
All right. Huff, puff. Here's the question.
And one of the media says, Who's faster, judiciary or the executive?
Oh, all right.
And Breyer says, oh, he's much faster.
Yeah.
And Clinton says, yeah, but he lasts longer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
that's
good
why it's so
old-fashioned.
important to appoint a 14-year-old.
I mean,
he's making my point for me.
Puff. Yes, right. Okay. Yeah, right. Well, that's true, and it's a good point, and of course, one that the Republicans have taken to heart at lower levels, in particular, in the judiciary.
Well, not just lower levels. They got 40 and 50-year-olds on the court.
Yeah, although I think that's
a 30-year
like a
term
reasonable
you're talking about here.
Age to bring. Yeah, they pay a great deal of attention to the age of the justices and the age of the lower court judges. They are, they've loved filling the benches with mid-30-year-olds, and so that they could have 10 years of experience by the time they nominated them to the Supreme Court. And
well, the only positive upside of that is some of them actually change their mind over time.
That's true. Well, you mentioned the top of the list of liberal justices, John Paul Stevens.
Right.
Republican nominee.
So, for anybody complaining about in advance, which I've already seen on Twitter, why doesn't Biden nominate somebody of quality instead of a black woman?
Oh, get yourself in trouble, why don't you? All right.
They've said that.
Shoo. Yeah, well, racist, I guess. Say that.
Instead of nominating somebody for identity politics, why don't you just nominate the best possible candidate? What if the best possible candidate happens to be, so there's a lot of that.
Okay, well, not my, I don't want to engage with them. But okay, I can see why people do it, and I'm just asking questions.
Well, some of the people saying these just asking questions have a lot of credentials after their name. I don't. I'm just saying.
All right. Well, you're asking for it. Not you.
So Sarah Binder also writes, re-upping my monkey cage blog post about how the GOP moved so fast to confirm Barrett in 2020 that Amy Coney Barrett was the first nominee confirmed without opposition vote since 1869. And then reminds us that the GOP just blew right past the Judiciary Committee rule that requires two minority senators to do any business.
I see. So, right, yes. So remember that in your blue slip deliberations.
Right. So all of that, Matt, to me, it's not just the fact that Breyer's retiring, probably doing the right thing. Those folks who downgraded Ruth Bader Ginsburg because she didn't retire.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that.
I don't know about that, but I would say Stephen Breyer is doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's true. Republicans view it. I saw them spending their time yesterday on
because Clinton is right. They last much longer.
That's true, and but they don't last forever. That's the other point, and so time to replace somebody every once in a while. I saw Republicans regarding that as that he had been bullied out of his seat by people saying it would be wise if you would retire, and then we could, have somebody else in your place who would be there for quite a long time, and it wouldn't fall to perhaps the next Republican president to nominate an 800th justice here.
So what if the Democrats, in response to that, say, "Oh, you think we're bullying him out of his seat? So what? What are you going to do about it?"
Well, there is that. There's no rule against it, and even if there was, who would care?
Somehow make some kind of point. What is this? 8th grade?
That's a worthy response. True.
We're doing it, and we have the votes, and that's the end of it. And if you don't like it, then get more votes. But right now, we have them.
Yeah.
You think you're going to get them to do all sorts of things. True. Fine. We'll see what you do when you get there. Right now, we have the votes, and this is what we're going to do. So in that article about playing hardball with Amy Coney Barrett, Sarah Binder says, equally important was Senate Republicans' near perfect unity that enabled them to cut corners for the minority member rule, for example.
Yeah.
Facing a united GOP, Democrats had no power to contest the rules infraction in any meaningful way. Well, facing a united Democratic Party, GOP should have no power to contest the rules infraction in any meaningful way. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
What's more, Republicans treated Election Day as a hard deadline. Many Republican senators, such as Judiciary Committee Lindsey Graham, viewed Barrett's confirmation as critical to their ability to win re-election. Somebody should read that to Dianne Feinstein.
Yes. Well, we would like to do it ahead of time rather than on Election Day. Dianne,
right, exactly.
With you.
So, all of that, again, in background. So Democrats rejoice, says the Washington Post. Republicans cast any new Supreme Court nominee as radical as election year fights begin. Again, my advice to our audience is pay attention to the dog whistles and see what they're really saying. And you'll have plenty of time to do that because we'll have plenty of time to do that debate. And no offense to Dianne Feinstein, but boy, this is not being played well by your office.
No, and this is like 5 of these in a row, and you should take the hint. And the hint is if I say Breyer is retiring, A, and then I say X should also retire, how would you solve that problem? All right, well, that is interesting, and I love the point about them blowing past the Judiciary Committee rule. And if you think about it for just a second, it's exactly the sort of thing that illustrates the difference between Democrats and Republicans and how they handle hardball in Congress. There are Democrats probably still standing there saying, yeah, but you're not allowed to do that. Like, shouldn't that mean that she's not really on the Supreme Court because it didn't work? I mean, that is, after all, the argument that people who are refusing to answer subpoenas from the January 6th committee are saying. The rules said you had to have this many, or this or that one had to be the ranking member, and it's not that way, so therefore my subpoena is invalid, and they're going to court on that.
And losing.
Yeah. And I mean, so, okay, look, that's the answer. So the compromise here is you have to answer the subpoena, and Amy Coney Barrett remains on the Supreme Court. I mean, I think that's a settlement that you guys should be happy with. But if you really want to contest it, then fine. Don't answer your subpoena for the committee. You'll have one from the Justice Department later on. And, yeah, Barrett's off and all of her decisions are invalid and we reversed all the previous decisions. Is that better? Is that the one you were asking for? No, I wanted both. Oh, okay, I see. Communitarianism. Well, no surprise there. But an excellent point. Yet, meanwhile, Democrats will say, well, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. And send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I hereby ban myself from this program for using filthy language. Somewhere along the line, I'm sure. All right, well...
Naughty language. You're going to have to go to the naughty center and apologize.
No more history, because...
Which leads me to my next topic. Let's do a quick international spin.
Oh.
Okay, we have world leaders looking at daily new cases in Denmark. Denmark is in the news because they're having an Omicron surge.
All right.
And if you look at their cases, it looks exactly like an Omicron surge.
Okay. Well,
the funny thing is that it's an Omicron surge with the new BA.2 stealth Omicron, which, again, as we talked about on the show yesterday, is only stealth because if you're not careful and you're a lab guy, it might show up looking like Delta, but it's still going to be a positive test. So it's not stealth to the patient.
To lab people, I guess. But right, yeah. Oh, I have it. I can feel it.
Right, and it's not stealth to the public health people who say, okay, it's Omicron. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to classify it as to whether it's Omicron 1 or Omicron 2 or son of Omicron or Omicron Junior or whatever, you know, then it's sort of important. But in any case, if you look at the curve, it just looks like an Omicron curve.
Yeah,
so
sure.
There's that. So that's why a lot of the experts are saying, okay, we noticed it, but it's not like don't panic over this. In fact, Ned Lamont told Connecticut, yeah, it's in Connecticut, don't panic over it.
There's nothing you can do. I mean,
oh, by the way, the state legislature said to Lamont, hey, you know your ability to impose mask mandates in schools, which you're not using?
Okay, yeah.
We're going to renew it for 90 days, just in case.
In case you decide to use it?
Yeah, but you're not using it, and we don't want you to. But just in case you need to.
Okay.
You got another 90 days.
That is an interesting compromise.
Connecticut is just handling this very well. I just don't understand why everybody doesn't do it this way. But then everybody in every state who thinks they're right is saying that, and that's part of the problem. And that gets to the next issue here. I sent you a guest link.
Guest link. Okay, let's look.
Guest link, not guest, but guest, G-U-A-S-T.
Oh, I'm supposed to guess.
A guest link.
What link it is. Yes. All right. Oh,
to an article from Financial Times, otherwise you couldn't read, called How the Biden Administration Failed the Omicron Test.
They thought it was Delta.
The new variant has exposed dysfunction in America's public health institutions as continued under a new president.
All right.
And it makes the point, I think, pretty saliently that, part of the problem here with the whole approach to this Omicron thing is that the public health institutions, if you haven't noticed, have really screwed up. Now, this is not a surprise, but, it helps to put this in a little perspective. In the first year of Biden's presidency, it says, much has changed about the U.S. response to COVID-19. Most adults have now been vaccinated. New, more effective treatments have been approved. That's all great. There's no more talk of miracle cures in the White House briefing room or self-medication with bleach, which is also great. But the past few months have also been plagued by some of the missteps and administrative dysfunction which occurred during the Trump era. The Biden administration's policies on boosters, at-home testing, masking, and quarantine have been halting, inconsistent, which critics say have made the country's Omicron wave far worse than it should have been. It turns out now they're sending at-home tests to people. Now they're sending masks to places where you could get them for free. They're also insisting that your insurance companies pay for it if you buy the tests yourself. I say scoop up any you can. Hand them out to people who otherwise don't get them or can't get them. Don't worry about taking them away from other people. Give them to other people, which you can only do if you get them. So go ahead and accept what's being given here.
All you can do otherwise is recommend, hey, try CVS. That's really helpful.
Right. It's even better. Here, I'll leave these in your mailbox. I don't have to actually see you.
Yeah.
It has come to the point where they're doing the right thing. They didn't want to do the right thing earlier. A lot of critics say that's because of Jeff Zients and some of the other people who are in charge, because nobody's really in charge.
Oh.
There's no czar. There's no one person who's running everything. And the only people who are giving Biden advice on this are the political and economic folks, not the public health folks.
Oh.
So that's part of the problem. But also, as this article says, at the root of these problems, say public health experts, is a malaise afflicting the U.S. government's major public health institutions. Feted, F-E-T-E-D, celebrated for years as global leaders in scientific research and public health policy. Center for Disease Control, Food and Drug Administration, and the National Institutes of Health have been slow to respond to the fast-changing nature of the pandemic and unable to coordinate effectively among themselves. This is, of course, no surprise to me. I spent a couple of years trying to fix that and didn't get anywhere. We have had a situation in which these agencies have not responded as they should have. That's pretty undeniable, said Zeke Emanuel, professor of healthcare management and a former advisor to Biden on COVID-19. The underlying theme is inflexibility, both with resources and ideology. As in, like, we're not sending tests to people. That's ridiculous. Well, now we are, because we changed our mind. It wasn't ridiculous. But we said it was because, like, you were suggesting something we didn't want to do.
And you didn't even know you didn't want to do it. It was just something you weren't doing, and you thought that we must not be doing it because it's not brilliant to be doing it, and to suggest it is therefore not brilliant, and therefore.
But I'm going to bring up something here, which I think is a really salient point that people sometimes ignore.
Okay.
So the article goes on to say, many now believe that unless Biden prioritizes reforming these agencies, which collectively employ nearly 50,000 people in HHS.
All right.
And that's often, by the way, why he wants governors to run these departments. Because, like, they're the size of Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. will continue to suffer a higher infection and death rate than many other developed countries. The Biden administration is probably now quickly figuring out, well, I don't know if they quickly do anything, some of the problems the Trump administration had were structural and institutional, says James Capretta, senior fellow at the right-leaning American Enterprise Institute and a former White House official. Fundamentally, the CDC in particular doesn't seem to be an operational agency. They're too slow and not forward-leaning and aggressive enough. And again, we've talked about this ad infinitum on the show. Part of that problem is that the CDC doesn't have the resources to do this themselves. They depend upon the state public health departments. And if you're depending on the Florida State Public Health Department, good luck.
You're finished, yeah.
You're finished. Same with Texas, same with Idaho, same with North Dakota and South Dakota especially. I mean, and Iowa. Yes. And that's what's going on here. And so that's why the CDC can't do it. One former Trump health official says Biden thought he could come in, put the scientists back in charge, and turn COVID around by simply not being the lunatic who preceded him. Well, the lunatic is gone.
Good guess.
But the administration's still making almost exactly the same mistakes he did. Okay? So even if you agree, and here's the point I'm going to make, even if you agree that reform is needed, part of the question is when. So the article goes on to say, and in interviewing Saline Gounder, who again is an epidemiologist who also served on Biden's transition team, even if there's broad consensus that structural reforms are overdue, the timing is challenging. It's really hard to reform the agency, she says, in the middle of a pandemic when you have people who are working 100-hour weeks for 2 years. The last thing you want to be doing is destabilizing the environment further.
Okay. Fair.
But many now think reform should be a priority for the second half of Biden's term, or whenever COVID doesn't have the country in its grip. Maybe we don't want to take apart agencies in the middle of a pandemic, says Emmanuel, but coming out of one, we need to reimagine them completely. He is absolutely right.
Well, sure.
This is a drum I've been beating for a long time.
I think there'd be a lot of support for that, even if there wasn't the history of of the bureaucracy overwhelming things. You would probably say, well, we have a better understanding of the kind of public health crises we're likely to face in the future, and the current structure wasn't particularly well suited to it, even if everything else prior to COVID had been perfect. So let's think about how we want to respond to it, because this is clearly, I think, the public health crisis of the future is the one that they always thought it was going to be, a pandemic of some kind.
Hello, who could have foreseen that?
Right.
So part of that issue then becomes, okay, well, how do you get that done? And that's where politics come in. And again, one of the themes that I had 10, 15 years ago in talking to HHS and CDC is you cannot ignore politics any more than you can ignore the anti-vaxxers, because you don't have a constituency, and who's going to support you? And if you've got a 50-50 Senate, for the sake of argument, where are the votes that you'll need to reorganize the agency? Because if you don't have those votes, it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will say, well, Congress never authorized this, so you can't do it.
Yeah.
This is all tied in to everything that's happening right now. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. Yes. So you have to think of the whole big picture here, and that's why you can't just reform it right now. You really have to think this through in terms of how you're going to do it, what the strategy is, and then figure out what the tactics are. You need them both. You can't just do tactics.
I think that's fine. I think you'll have widespread agreement on the idea of you do want to reform it, but you don't want to do it now. I don't know who disagrees. I mean, there's probably
even Dianne Feinstein would agree with that.
What's the rush? Sure. Ask her first, and then that can be it. We've gotten both sides of the story in this because I asked Dianne Feinstein and she told me both. So there you go. Now you're covered. Yeah, no, I can't imagine anybody saying who would be the person that said, no, the reform has to happen. It has to happen now, immediately, and I've got huge support on both sides of the aisle. Can't imagine it happening.
Right.
Okay.
So let's.
That's good. That works out well.
That's my pandemic discussion for today.
Okay.
Otherwise the numbers are really looking very good in New York. A couple of weeks ago, we were up at the 20% positivity rate, and now we're below 5 in Brooklyn.
Well, that's good. Everywhere else is okay too.
So New York can look at reforming.
Yeah, you can do it at the state level.
No, it's not okay everywhere else.
Okay.
Upstate in the North Country. It's still up in the 20% range. And so we said the other day, this is 50 pandemics. It's actually more than 50.
It's at least
Take
51.
New York State, for example.
Right.
What's happening upstate New York is very different than what's happening in New York City. New York City came first, got better first. Now it's hitting upstate. Upstate will get better. It's getting better. The whole state is getting better, but at a slower or a more delayed pace.
Okay.
because of what's happening upstate, and you'll see that in other places too. Right. And so when we're saying, okay, we're doing okay here, they're not doing okay there.
All right. Well, they're masking
Florida's okay,
the
Chicago's
numbers.
Okay, but California's still getting hit pretty hard.
They too will have a difference between regions of their gigantic
state
state
they will.
as well. Yes, and I am seeing that on the nightly maps, that the places that were bright red with hot spots 2 weeks ago not only have the bright red hot spots moved and moved west, there was nowhere else for them to go, but that leaves behind the trough after the spike. So some of the best, that is to say, lowest day-to-day numbers of new cases are in the places that were just hottest. And the East Coast turns back blue on the map of highest and lowest numbers, and the pandemic moves west, from where all the people now catching up with all the people who are saying, I haven't seen it. It doesn't exist. Don't mix.
In some ways, I feel like the worst storm hits, and it's as bad as everybody said.
Yeah.
And then the storm is gone. And the survivors look around and say, well, see, we didn't have to do anything.
What storm?
Storm is gone.
Snow melts. What's the problem?
We didn't have to wear masks. We never needed to be vaccinated.
Yeah. And wave after wave, this happens, too.
Yeah, it's just, and it's astounding.
So
I think that there are very legitimate discussions to be had about whether or not, for example, kids under 5 really need to wear masks.
All right.
In school. Because, do they?
I don't know.
You're going to tell a 4-year-old not to touch their face or squeeze the nose piece so that they don't fog their glasses. Okay, I get that. That's a legitimate discussion to have, because there really isn't a lot of data to support or oppose one way or the other, and so it's an opinion. I get that. Everybody's allowed to have their own opinion. But when you're talking about older kids like high school, I don't think there's much of a debate.
Okay.
And if you're talking about middle school, okay, I get that that's on the table. I don't think that should be the issue and the hill that you choose to die on, and hopefully nobody does. But, there are other issues that seem to be really clear. I don't get and understand what the Supreme Court is doing or trying to do, or the lower courts are doing and trying to do, when they block vaccine mandates. They're killing people. That article we talked about the other day about human sacrifice, I mean, it's right there. That's a decision that people made. Yeah. Why the hell are they making that decision after what we know now? That's crazy.
It is, and they know it is too. And Alito was conscious of it, but still went the other direction and said, "I want to do what I want to do, but I want to make sure. I want to lay my mark right here and say you're not allowed to blame us for any deaths that ensue just because we were upholding the law." Of course, the answer to that is yes, we are, and you can't make us not do it. So, yeah, I'm nightly keeping track, just as I had been counting how many people contracted the virus and how many died since Trump made his promise to deploy the military to send everybody therapeutics that now don't work. But I'm now tracking, since Alito complained about that and they handed down their decision, how many people have contracted the virus and how many have died. And by the way, like we said, it's a very quick-moving thing. 25,000 people have died just since the Supreme Court said we're not going to do anything to help, but don't blame us. There's a lot of people dying still. So the numbers are big. Sorry.
So let's talk about mask mandates in school. This is from Slate by Dahlia Lithwick. I think it's a great piece.
All right.
I don't know if I gave it to you, but if I didn't, I should have.
That's how
and
great
so
it is.
I will. I'll stick
Give
it
it
at
to
the
me
end.
as a
That's how good it is.
non-fungible token. Can you do that?
There it is.
All right.
Virginia schools are melting down. In the first week on the job, Governor Glenn Youngkin has created a crisis.
Down. Yes. Oh, yes, he has. That's true.
And I'll be asking you for commentary on this because you live it. Virginia's new governor is just a week into his term. Already he has reminded the nation what the first weeks of the Trump administration looked like: chaos. He issued an executive order granting parents of the Commonwealth's 1.5 million school children the ability to exempt their kids from their school district's mask policies if they choose. Several superintendents immediately announced plans to keep the mask requirements. The lieutenant governor announced that Youngkin could pull funding. Parents sued, and that's still up in the air in terms of where that's going. But basically, they say mask optional policy violates both the Virginia Constitution, which provides, quote, the supervision of schools in each school division shall be vested in a school board, end quote, and a 2021 state law that requires school systems to follow federal health guidelines. And the CDC says, mask the kids.
Yeah. By the way, you like that trick where the CDC says, we can't handle everything, send it to the states, and the states say, okay, our new law is follow federal guidance from CDC.
Well, that's Virginia, and who knows what might change. Again, it's good that the state Senate at least is something of a block on the House and the governor's office.
Yes.
On Friday, a Virginia mom was charged in Page County. Where's Page County?
That's
east, west, north, south.
Central.
Luray
Caverns. You know where that is? All right.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not.
With threatening to bring every single gun loaded to her kid's school on Monday, she apologized. Yeah. She was speaking metaphorically. There were dueling rallies in Loudoun County. Guns. Students refusing to wear masks were directed to school auditoriums.
Yes, they were.
Some parents pulled their kids in school. Creators of the website Mask Off Monday instructed parents to send kids to school prepared to defy the school guidance.
We're defying.
With these instructions, you may feel the need to explain your mask issues further. Resist that feeling. When it comes to the law, explanation is weakness.
Explanation is weakness.
Tell that to the judge. Tell it to the judge. The site goes on to explain it's time to get back to normal life, and the time to push is right now. We talked about this I want it to be normal crap. Okay. Welcome to hell, says Delia Lathwick. There's no point debating who in the complicated mess of parents, schools, local school boards, states, or federal agencies should have the last word. That complicated legal question presumably will be resolved in the courts, has been temporarily obviated by the choice to say that the wearing of masks is an exigent denial of individual liberty, akin to the wearing of yellow stars in Nazi Germany, and the governor's decision to empower parents is therefore to refuse it. Youngkin, who ran as a moderate, entered office with a ban on the teaching of critical race theory. His attorney general has reversed the state's position on Roe v. Wade. The attorney general fired UVA's counsel, who was on leave working as the top investigator for the U.S. House panel investigating January 6th, insisting this was not a politically motivated act, but not offering any other reason.
But it just isn't that one.
Okay. As Bill Scher notes, Youngkin changed his tune on mask mandates only after winning his election by 50.6. As recently as last fall, his campaign told the Washington Post that Youngkin would not go as far as DeSantis. And after bigfooting his way into a crisis on Saturday, Youngkin tried to tweet his way out of it with vague platitudes like, I urge everyone to love your neighbor. Listen to your principal.
Well, I love him. Yes. He's a jerk.
Yeah. Now, the problem here is Youngkin got the order wrong. He was supposed to start with love and respect for school principals and then build up to rancor and division and threats of violence. It's so much harder to go in the other direction, as he tried to do. You can't start with the violence and then go to the love. You got to do it the other way around.
I know. I thought his comments, I was waiting for him to tweet, you're all very special. We love you. You know, that's sort of they're good people very fine people on both sides.
Right. And so she says the author of this hard day, not the courts, not the school districts, not the principals, not the children, not the parents. The author of this mess was the guy who signed a nonsensical order without thinking through the repercussions. The best way to ensure public contempt for every level of government is by pitting various parts of it against one another, dumping it on the courts to resolve, and then telling a million parents to do whatever they want and just do it with love.
Yeah.
It hardly matters what a court says at this juncture. Parents have been told to defy any authority but their own. Teaching just became a significantly harder thing in Virginia, and so did learning, if that's something they still care about.
It is, well, the school systems appear to, but yeah, they're having a hard time dealing with the governor's view of it. No, of course, remember, he ran on being the savior of the schools, and they are in chaos and disarray.
Yeah, thank you. You've been there a week. This is what you did. And so, there are some weaknesses in our structural system of government. For example, gentleman's agreement to accept the winner of the election as the winner of the election. There are some structural issues with the Supreme Court. Judiciary rules. We don't have to pay attention to them.
Right.
We'll just force through whatever it is we want. There are some structural problems with public health agencies like CDC, who simply are not built to respond in a quick fashion. and claim the mantle of only we can say this or that or everything else. And then, for example, they screwed up the original COVID test. People don't remember that, but the original tests were wrong. And that's because CDC insisted they did it their own way. And then they sent out bad tests to all the labs. All of these, and now the schools are being exposed as not exactly running the way you'd like them to. Mm-hmm. And so the pandemic really has forced pressure on all of the institutions and found them all wanting. And again, raises the overall arching issue. Yeah, we need reforms, not necessarily right now. Mm-hmm. We're still trying to cope with all of these things right now. This isn't necessarily the time to reform, but we got to get through this period so that we can get to a reform period, because that's just so sorely needed everywhere.
Yes, it's just so needed in this great country of ours, as Sarah Palin used to say.
Yes.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can get some Republican agreement on that. If you can get them to agree that, for instance, reform is necessary at CDC, but not right now in the middle of the pandemic, on the logic that, yes, you don't do this in the middle of a crisis, you will see them abandon that immediately if you say something like, well, okay, we also, I guess, all agree that perhaps our school systems could use some reform too. Yes, but not in the middle of a crisis, right? No, actually, right now would be a fantastic time. Ban some books, throw away the mask mandate, tell everybody they can do whatever they want. Maybe we should eliminate all vaccination requirements whatsoever, from measles to mumps to coronavirus, and see how that pandemic goes. And what can I tell you? If your children get polio, what are you going to do? Those were the rules. I didn't follow them, but take life as it comes. There's no getting anybody back at that. Nobody's going to pay for your medical care for your kids. It's just they make a decision, and if it falls on you and ruins your life, there's not too much you can do about it. I don't know. Organize, I guess. Pay me back at the ballot box.
We could throw the healthcare system
cheat,
and how that's been stressed by the pandemic and whether that's failing on top of everything else. So there's a whole bunch of institutions that are in that situation.
Why don't we just go back to the whole, state of nature thing? Nasty Brutus in short sounds pretty good. Let's try it.
So Zach Beauchamp at Vox, in a Vox-plainer, talked with political scientist Lee Drutman, very sharp guy. The title of the article is How to Depolarize a Country. An expert makes a strong argument for transforming the way American elections work, but could it ever happen?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's transform the way elections work. I think we can.
But not right now. Let's just do it after the next election.
Right. Sure. If there is one, we'll do another one better next time. Okay.
Right.
Let's just take care of that.
So Beauchamp says, look, it's not really the party system that's the problem.
We love parties.
I mean, we're in agreement that the evolution of the Republican parties pushed us in the anti-democratic direction. So if that's the case, it seems like the drivers of the Republican Party's changes are primarily long-standing social dynamics in American politics. Fundamentally, the conflict over race that's defined the structure and arc of U.S. history for so long. And if that's the case, why would having multiple parties, for example, which is one of Drutman's solutions, change things? I mean, in the 1850s, you had Democrats, Whigs, and Republicans, and the Whigs ended up falling apart because they couldn't navigate the question of slavery. And the fact that we had three parties didn't stop us from having a civil war. So that's because it was a conflict over slavery, not the number of parties we had.
Yes. Okay. I'm in agreement with that.
And Drutman said, okay, that's fair enough. But there's two ways I would think about this in the current system. One is a practical challenge. Say you're a Democrat, you think the Republican Party is incredibly dangerous, a party that's been taken over by an extreme illiberal faction. But Republicans keep winning elections because they're the default party for the part of the country that sees the Democrats as the opposition or can't bring themselves to vote for Democrats. So that's a problem because I don't see any way in which Democrats win an overwhelming national majority.
Yeah. Okay.
But what if there were a center-right party that can get 15% of the vote? That's what I was saying before about never-Trumper parties.
I see.
That's why I support them. Let them siphon off 15% of the vote from the Republicans.
All right, if that's what they're doing. Yeah, I worry a little bit that sometimes they end up siphoning off the wrong votes.
Yeah, well, look what's going on now. So that's on the practical side of how you get out of this. And then the other question I think is worth asking, why did the Republican Party go crazy? And I think a lot of that does have to do with the binary party system. If you're a plurality of a plurality, which is the MAGA faction,
All right.
You can take over one of the two major parties, and there's nowhere else for folks in that party to go unless they want to join the opposition. Never-Trumpers were willing to do that. They flat out said, we're voting for Democrats until this gets fixed. But they're not large enough to make that difference, and they didn't bring all of them with them. And this binary us against them creates a political situation where the Republicans basically had to double down on racist rhetoric because their economic policies are incredibly unpopular. You know, buried under this is the whole trickle-down stuff and how that's failed. Reaganism failed. Nobody likes it, right? They wanted the government to help us out during the pandemic. They weren't in favor of Ron Johnson's, it's not my job to help other people's children, which I think he said yesterday.
Yeah, and every other day of his life, sure.
Okay, they could do that in a two-party system because there's only two options. So if you put a third option, you give a way for Republicans who don't like what the Republicans are doing, the Liz Cheneys of the world, to vote for another party without having to vote for Democrats.
I guess.
Yeah, and the Kinsingers and the other people who retired because they couldn't deal with this anymore. So, you know, it's just something to think about. I don't know if that's the right answer. I don't know, as you point out, whether you just poll the wrong people. But that's one of the reasons why I always cut slack to Never-Trumpers. No, I don't agree with what they want to do, but they agree with us about what the Republicans want to do. That's a major issue right now.
That's a big deal, and it's worth doing. Yeah, and they'll remind you every once in a while that, oh, yeah, I don't agree with that guy. I think Bill Kristol had that moment yesterday, engineering an answer to the Breyer thing. Did you happen to see that one?
No.
Oh, well, the obvious play here is you put Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court, and then you pick Mitt Romney as your...
I think you should put Susan Collins and Mitt Romney on the court.
Right. Why not? You can get rid of them, too. Get them out of the way. It did raise... I did wonder, so who's the 51st vote to confirm Harris in that scenario? I'm not sure. Anyway, but the idea of putting Romney...
Well, again, there's no rule that says she can't serve both. It doesn't say that in the Constitution.
Oh, I'll check. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I forgot my name and what show I was doing. I'm puzzled by this. Is there really I don't know about that. It feels like there's got to be something, or something you could point to that would say, well, this certainly argues against the idea of someone serving simultaneously as Vice President of the United States and as a Justice of the Supreme Court. And I'm sure that there would be some doctrine fashioned for it, well, certainly by this court. But I wouldn't consider it necessarily to be an unfair doctrine to impose after the fact, but maybe that is something, it's possible, I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it's possible that it's something that wasn't addressed anywhere specifically in the Constitution, and you can play the show me in the Constitution where it says game and have a good time doing it. Well, I don't think it's something we need to investigate immediately because I don't think it's in any danger of happening, but always wise to bring these contingencies up and see if you can plan for how to deal with them just in case. You never want to leave a door open like that for somebody to say, oh yeah, hey, what is the story? Is this all right, I guess this is Greg's source for this. Let's take a look at it. As long as it's here, if I don't have to go around looking for it and think about how to refute it, I'll just read it. Where is this from? WCNC, Charlotte, North Carolina's television station of some kind with some affiliation with some network or another, probably. I just don't know which one. WCNC. Okay. Yes, it's possible for a sitting vice president to be nominated to the Supreme Court. Well, sure, nominated. Yeah, okay. Rumors began trending that Biden would nominate Harris to the Supreme Court after CNN published a report about tension in the White House. NBC affiliate. Thank you, Greg. Let's see. Authors here are Ariane Datil and Kelly Jones. I mean, well, let's see what they have to say. I mean, the question is, can you be nominated to the Supreme Court? Sure. Why not? The question is, can you serve in both roles? I think that's probably not. I would guess that that's not what we want, certainly. Well, let's see what they have to say here. In the days after CNN published a report about Vice President Kamala Harris's performance in the White House, rumors trended online based on one paragraph in the article Defenders and, this, by the way, is from November of last year and updated in the last day or so now that it's a hot topic again. But this is a throwback to November here. Defenders and people who care for Harris. Care for Harris. She's not a patient, and it's not as I don't care much for that Kamala Harris person. But people who do are getting frantic. What? Okay. Anyway, when they're annoyed, some pass around a recent Onion story mocking her lack of more substantive work, one with the headline, White House urges Kamala Harris to sit at computer all day in case emails come through. It's the Onion. When they're depressed, they bat down the Aaron Sorkin-style rumor that Biden might try to replace her by nominating her to a Supreme Court vacancy. That chatter has already reached top levels of the Biden orbit, according to one person who's heard it, the article said. Using CrowdTangle, a public insights tool. What is this? Yeah, a public insights tool owned by Facebook. Verify, whatever they are, found thousands of mentions of Harris and Supreme Court across Facebook and Twitter. That prompted the Verify team to ask our source if that's possible. And okay, so what's the question? It says here, the question, ready? Is it possible for a sitting vice president to be nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court? Okay, that is a very different question than whether they can serve in both roles. Of course, the answer is yes. They asked their sources. Erwin Chemerinsky, Dean of the University of California at Berkeley Law School. Jeffrey Stone. Hey, Jeff. And you want the full title? Edward H. Levy or Levi. I don't know how they pronounce it. Some people say Levy. Levi, distinguished service professor. He's a law professor at the University of Chicago. And the third, our third guest tonight, the 25th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Gentlemen, amendment, how are you? Let's begin our debate. That's an interesting set of sources. Honestly, I mean, I know from, reading their stuff, both of these guys, and both of them, quite honestly, I guess they were probably astonished that they were asked this question. But let's see if they handle it with aplomb. The answer, yes, it's possible. The two law professors told Verify, but there hasn't been a sitting or former vice president who has been nominated to the Supreme Court in U.S. history. What we found is in the next section here. This is WCNC talking. Even though Kamala Harris is vice president, she could still be a potential Supreme Court nominee, experts tell Verify. All right, this is getting dumb. This is not changing in any way. Of course they can be nominated. Anybody can be nominated. Vladimir Putin can be nominated. Just a matter of what can they do once they're confirmed. And the answer is resign the vice presidency and sit on the Supreme Court. But okay. There are very few restrictions on who can become a Supreme Court justice. The Constitution lists no age or citizenship restrictions. You thought I was kidding about Vladimir Putin. And you don't even have to practice law or have a law degree. The only restriction for being nominated to the Supreme Court is an impeachment and conviction that bars you from any federal office, which is why it would be a good idea to do that with Donald Trump. What's his face? Yeah, what's his orange face? In an email to Verify, Erwin Chemerinsky, Dean of the University of California at Berkeley Law School, said, I do not see any impediment to a sitting vice president being nominated for the Supreme Court. It was that basically that was very polite. Because the answer is duh. Yeah, sure, why not? Jeffrey Stone, by the way, Jeffrey Stone, let's see. As I recall, I think my dad knew Jeff Stone in college, if I remember that story correctly. And then Jeffrey Stone was in my big, famous political story where I got to go to the White House and sit in the cabinet room and talk to Barack Obama and tell him, you're making a giant mistake by not prosecuting the crimes of the prior administration. This whole look back, forward, not back thing is going to come back to haunt you, and it's going to come back to haunt you very quickly. The next Republican president is going to go absolutely nuts. And then he did. But not before Barack Obama said, you're out of your mind. You don't know what you're talking about. And sorry. And not only that, I was trying to be polite where I was saying, we really need to do something with the prior administration. We have to do something to demarcate what they've done from what we're doing, and one as invalid and illegal and everything else as okay. And he said, you're speaking euphemistically and you're talking about prosecuting members of the former, I'm speaking euphemistically because you're the president and I'm a jerk. So, I'm trying to speak euphemistically and be decent about it. But all right, you want to cut through the BS, that's admirable of you. But you've cut through to the wrong position, sir. Anyway, Jeff Stone was in the room for that one. He probably doesn't remember it because he was like a super duper law professor at the time and whatnot. But anyway, it was very nice to see him in there and hear what he had to say. And so an interesting discussion, to say the least. Now I feel this additional affinity for Jeffrey Stone. Anyway, sometimes he gets crap wrong too. But he's right on this one. Jeffrey Stone, law professor at the University of Chicago, added that if a sitting vice president were confirmed to the Supreme Court, they would have to resign as vice president. Why, we agree on that. Section 2 of the 25th Amendment states, if there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president would nominate a new vice president who would then take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. Which is, by the way, an interesting mechanism. I'm not certain that, it does say that. I'm just sort of wondering, I guess it's a good safeguard to have a requirement that the House okay it too. But really, you'd think that maybe only the Senate would have a say in that because he's going to be the president of the Senate. Why should the House have any vote in who the president of the Senate is going to be? There's nothing else about the service of the vice president that impacts the House. But I don't know. That's what they did back then, way back when they did the 25th Amendment, which is not back at the founding, obviously. I guess that was of some interest to them for some reason. I guess they just wanted a higher barrier to, more voices and more votes. Okay. Right. Let's see. According to records from the U.S. House and Senate, neither a sitting vice president nor a past vice president has ever been nominated to the Supreme Court. Only one former president has been nominated to the Supreme Court. That was William Taft in 1921. John Quincy Adams was nominated before he was elected president and declined the appointment. So we can verify, yes, it's possible for a sitting vice president to be nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court. All right. What can I tell you? This is what we thought. The Constitution, that Greg's asking, so what does the Constitution itself actually say? The Constitution, as originally written, doesn't say anything about it, so you might be right. But the 25th Amendment, I guess, the 25th Amendment just says what to do about whether or not how to replace the vice president once they move over to the Supreme Court. But doesn't say that they have to move over. They could, that'd be interesting. We haven't had it work at that level, but remember the last administration bent a lot of rules where there were people in two jobs, acting this and permanent that at the same time. Wasn't it Mick Mulvaney who was acting White House chief of staff, but still apparently heading or what was it? It was the OMB that he was the head of at the same time. And there was somebody else who was they jumped over to run the CFPB while they were still, there were a couple of those places. Oh, well. That's it's a good point that, all right. So, but this article doesn't, the article doesn't settle the question of whether or not someone can sit in both seats at the same time. It's just one off from that, a misunderstanding in terms of whether or not a VP could be nominated. I don't know why that would be a question for anybody, but, I guess it was, and the answer is yes, they can. The real question is, can they serve as both? And I don't know exactly why they couldn't, other than, well, everybody knows that they can't. There must be something, and I guess I'll search offline and see if we can nail it down. Maybe somebody on Twitter has an answer for that, but I guess not. Not so far. Anyway, we'll get back around to that. Note to self. There's no way I'm going to make this note either. All right. Other things I wanted to pick up on. I told you at the outset. Maybe I will make a note for myself. VP/SCOTUS ? That's the note. Somebody remember what that note is about and tell me again later. Okay. How will I segue here? One thing I wanted to take care of that was briefly mentioned by Greg and I think properly glossed over. But if you really want to examine and parse down and drill down, as they say, into the issue. He mentioned that here in Virginia, the chaos created by Glenn Youngkin's poorly thought out executive order, purportedly repealing the mask mandates for public schools, and the defiance that there's been across northern Virginia for all of this. And, of course, Loudoun County being a focus. And yesterday and the day before, I guess, Republicans tried to manufacture a dust-up over this. He mentioned that at the forefront of this was the organizers of Maskless Monday. This was anti-mask mandate parents, the distinct minority, I remind you again, here in Loudoun County, despite all the attention on it, organizing a Maskless Monday protest-type thing where they would send their kids to school without masks on Monday, despite the fact that the county asserted the right to maintain the mask mandate under Virginia law and the Virginia Constitution. But it's there's some question. And I guess the only part of this mess that Youngkin has kind of sort of gotten right is that he has said afterwards to supporters of his executive order, we need to let the courts rule on this, and I urge you to stay calm and remember that some people do want to wear masks, and you should leave them alone. This isn't about mandating that masks not be allowed. This is about my order that the school districts ought not to require them of you, but it gives you no right to demand that others take their masks off. And ultimately, it also means this will be settled in court. I think we're going to be right. You need to sit tight and, I guess make your own decisions about whether or not you're going to have your child attend school during this time. Well, anyway, they said they were going to send their kids maskless to school on Monday as a big protest. I asked my son, who's in a Loudoun County public high school, did you see anybody? Was there any indication of any organized protest or even just random individuals who were running around without masks? And he said, didn't see anybody. Made no impact on my day. And it may be that there weren't any in his school. As it turns out, there were perhaps 100 such students across the entirety of the county's school system from K through 12, which tells you another thing about the relative strength of this radical position of not only of opposing mask mandates, but of saying, I will force my kids into being a pawn in this fight. Only about 100 people could manage to do that. And anyway, so they tried to manufacture a scandal, and the way it broke down, we'll read you the article from HuffPost. Liz Skalka spells it out here. Basically, they attempted to gin up the outrage machine, and it didn't quite work, but they made a valiant effort at it. This is a piece called Anatomy of a GOP Non-Scandal. A call to a radio show from a Virginia parent spread to top conservative pundits, but it quickly turned into a bad game of telephone and also didn't work very well. But give it time. It may yet just need time to ripen. At 11:20 a.m. Monday, an editor for the right-wing Daily Caller tweeted out a link to a radio interview with a woman from Loudoun County, Virginia, who claimed her child was being strong-armed and intimidated by his principal and many others for refusing to wear a mask at school. Okay. Let's see. Oh, and I'm getting an update here from Greg. I want to check in on what that's about. Okay. Back down to the Mississippi folks. All right. And the story we left behind before, the Tennessee censorship situation. All right, so I'll hang on to that for later. Back to the Loudoun County story. Oops, where have I left it? Here we are. And I guess I'll just say that, the Daily Caller being involved in this is a tip, and it's tweeted out a link. Whose tweet was it? Not the same guy as last time, but it was Daily Caller writers who managed to whip up the frenzy about the transgender issues in Loudoun County schools that was the real driver of the anger of the closing days of the Virginia gubernatorial campaign that supposedly put Youngkin up over the top. And just as we were reading the story about the polling afterwards, during and afterwards, and yesterday, and finding out that, no, there really was never any mask mandate or school closure issue component to the anger about schools that national pundits say cost Terry McAuliffe the election in Virginia. It was about other issues. One of the issues being the transgender frenzy whipped up by the Daily Caller. So they're trying again on masks, but so far it hasn't caught on yet. And, it might, but the artificiality of it is being exposed here. So let's go on here. At 11:20 a.m. Monday, an editor for Daily Caller tweeted out a link to a radio interview with a woman from Loudoun County who claimed her child was being, quote, strong-armed and intimidated by his principal and many others, unquote, for refusing to wear a face mask at school. The interview was pegged to a major news event, Governor Glenn Youngkin's executive order making masks optional in Virginia's public schools, which went into effect on Monday, and the lawsuit by 7 districts challenging its legality. Loudoun is one county that is still requiring students to mask up in classrooms as the issue is settled in the courts. The tweet linking to the interview with the frustrated parent eventually reached former Donald Trump advisor Stephen Miller, who retweeted it to his 100,000 followers. Ned Ryan, the CEO of American Majority, the national group that trains conservative political candidates, tweeted that Loudoun County's school board is, quote, out of control and is, quote, basically threatening kids with suspension if they do not wear masks in school. We need to make sure that there are consequences for these people. Of course, that's what they really want. This is all about signaling consequences for these people. But of course, what about the first part? Is any of that true? Is the reason for that you call for, that you're making demands for consequences true? Oh, no, it's not. Oh, well, we want the consequences anyway. And that's what it's really all about. A GOP House Ways and Means Committee staffer tweeted it around 1 p.m. that he, quote, just got a heads up that Loudoun County schools are punishing kids who won't wear masks by putting them in the equivalent of a rubber room without access to instruction, like a rubber room, like a mental hospital, right? Teachers insisting kids wear masks regardless of the governor's order and saying, wait until SCOTUS decision. Well, they are saying in Loudoun County School that, you need to wear a mask until the Supreme Court, I guess, or wherever a court ultimately decides whether or not they're going to uphold the legality of the Youngkin order. But that's called, follow the law. And now some people may say, well, follow the law, follow the governor's executive order. But that's not law. Don't forget that part. Anyway, conservative pundits Hugh Hewitt and Guy Benson also jumped on the case. Hewitt linked to his interview Monday with Youngkin, who offered an email address for parents facing reprisals like this, like this policy for LSC. Okay. LSC. LCS, Loudoun County Schools, maybe? LCPS is what we usually say. Anyway, so they've got a tip line for turning in teachers who are insisting on masking, I guess, as well. Benson linked to a local news article from Loudoun County. Let's see. The local news article is from WTOP Radio. Okay, because there's another link to a publication called Loudoun Now, another part of the story links to. Anyway, Benson links to a local news article that quoted a high school principal echoing the district's policy about virtual learning in the auditorium for maskless students. The same article noted that while many walked in without masks, more complied with the school system's rule. So now we're getting at least to the bottom of what happened to the whole rubber room thing. Well, as it turns out, long story short, if we can't get through it, the rubber room was the library, or in some cases, the auditorium. Like places that students go normally anyway. But yes, they did say, if you're not going to wear a mask, then we're going to divert you from your normal classroom. But that's your choice, not ours. If you wear a mask, you can go wherever you want. Don't wear a mask, well, then we're worried about you. So here's Ned Ryan's tweet is embedded in the thing here. Remember, this is the Loudoun County School Board is out of control, basically threatening kids with suspension if they do not wear masks in school. We need to make sure there are consequences. Other than the flurry of tweets from GOP operatives, there's been no evidence of mass chaos or suspensions over the competing mask orders, just endless parental squabbling. A district spokesperson told HuffPost that about 200 students have arrived at school without a mask, and most ended up wearing one and going to class. That's out of more than 82,000 students. The chain of events on Monday demonstrates how the right has wielded the anger around COVID protocols and school curriculums for political gain. And by the way, that's a conflation of two things, but I think they're trying to point out that there's been a conflation, but they probably could have made it a little bit clearer. The anger around COVID protocols and school curriculums. Well, masks are CRT somehow. Interesting, like the dog whistle material that Greg was going over earlier. In this case, a call to a radio show from a woman in Virginia spread nationally to top conservative pundits in just a few hours, but it became a bad game of telephone, growing more distorted as it quickly circulated. So 2 parts of the games here, by the way, of the game that's going on. And I believe they make mention of this later on in the article. Though, the concerned parent in Loudoun County is, the big political activist who's organizing the protest against masks. The head of the Maskless Monday organization, whatever that might actually be, is the woman who coincidentally was just concerned parent who was making a call. So, the whole thing was planned and ready to go from the day the order came down. Well, the order will come down. We know certain school systems will try to defy the order. I will defy their defiance of the order and call the radio show and say my child is being discriminated against and is being held captive and armed. So what was it? She said intimidated and arm twisted, basically, whatever that means, basically. So, oh, really? He was twisting his arm? Well, no, metaphorically. All right. So he's being intimidated. I feel like he's being intimidated. Now, he's being asked to sit in the library. That's the intimidation. Sit in the library? Well, yeah, he's been removed from his class, diverted to another room. Like a rubber room? This is an outrage. They're being threatened with suspension. There have to be consequences. Now, and at no point does she say, now, wait a minute. All I said was, I want him to be able to go to class, but he's sitting in the library instead. I didn't say anything about any rubber room. And no, her reaction is, that's right, rubber room, everybody. Let's go with that. Everybody whip up the frenzy. Let's get everybody, screaming about the need for consequences. I'll read on, and you'll see where the rest of this is going here. In this case, the call to the radio show from a woman spread nationally, right, and became distorted as it quickly circulated. Loudoun County has become a national case study for debates about whether students should have to wear masks at school. It eventually became that. First, it was a debate about everything else. And also how they should learn about racism in the U.S. That's made the school district a target for fear-mongering. Last year, Republicans, including Youngkin, alleged that a, quote, gender-fluid boy, enabled by the district's inclusive bathroom policy, had sexually assaulted a female student in the girls' bathroom, but there was never any evidence linking the attack to the bathroom policy. In fact, there was evidence that it couldn't possibly have had anything to do with it. And then additionally, evidence that there were some extenuating circumstances as between this boy and this girl. And although you always have the right to decline a sexual encounter, it is of some interest that this wasn't not only a result of the bathroom policy, but then they said, that aside, this was still a case of a transgender person lurking in a bathroom to attack random passersby, which was our big concern about these inclusive bathroom policies. And it wasn't that either. So really, it was none of the things that you are worried about with respect to transgender bathroom policy. Well, we'd have to admit, yes, if there were rules, but there aren't. So the answer is no. And anyway, somehow we'll turn that into a masking controversy. Anyway, let's fit in on just a little bit more here before the break. There was more controversy this month when Youngkin announced that one of his first executive orders would make masks in school optional, setting off a debate about whether that's the purview of the governor or of individual school boards. In the interim, Youngkin has urged parents to remain calm and follow orders. I urge everyone to love your neighbor, listen to school principals, and to trust the legal process, he tweeted last week. After this, how it went wrong. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Let me continue with this HuffPost article and get through the rest of it, so you'll see exactly, what's actually going on here. But the governor can only come up with the weak sauce of, well, love your neighbor. I mean, that's good. That's nice. Listen to school principals, which is okay. Put your mask back on, and as far as Loudoun County goes, and trust the legal process. The spokesperson for Loudoun County Schools described the interim mask policy in an email to HuffPost, and it goes like this. Students who are not wearing a mask will be asked to wear one. Wow, asked to wear one. That's horrible. If they do not have a mask, one will be provided to them. If a student refuses to wear a mask, staff will immediately, kill and dismember them? No. Staff will meet with the student and contact their parent or guardian to discuss and identify the reason the student will not comply. You get a chance to state it. That's nice. If noncompliance is related to a medical or financial need, the school-based team will develop a plan of action to support the student in following the requirement. Our protocol for students that refused to follow the school division's mitigation protocol was to send them to a common area, such as the auditorium, where they could access the Schoology platform and continue their schoolwork. Remember, you may not know this, but I can tell you it's true. In Loudoun County, it's awesome. It's a fantastic place. Every student in Loudoun County Public Schools has been issued a Chromebook laptop equipped with Wi-Fi, of course, and on school grounds, they have access to the internet via Wi-Fi in any of the rooms. And the Schoology platform will deliver their assignments to them and allow them to turn them in electronically as well and communicate with teachers throughout the day. So you move to the auditorium, you can access the Schoology platform. You can access it because you've been given a laptop as well, so fantastic. Now you can continue with your schoolwork. They were encouraged to email teachers if they had questions, and teachers stopped by throughout the day to help students as their schedule allowed. Bathroom breaks were given to the students, in case you're worried about that, as well as setting up a special lunch period to make sure that they were fed. So then what's the issue? Your kids need to be in school. They're in school. Kids need to be able to see one another's faces. Well, they can see one another's faces in this room where no one wants to wear any masks. Sure. Kids need to be able to interact with their teachers. Well, the teachers will come and see them during the day and make sure that everything is going okay and contact them over the Schoology platform as well, and the schooling will be going on. And, if they don't want to make it safe for themselves to be in the classrooms with everybody else, they can come to school and be taken care of during the day, and parents can go to work, and they can come here and they can work on their work and talk to their teachers and, yes, go to the bathroom and, yes, eat lunch just like they all need to do, just like any other student, just not in the classroom. In other words, there's no rubber room without access to instruction. Total fabrication. But don't worry about it. The point is we're trying to win on CRT and transgender stuff, and you hate all of that stuff. Who cares if we're lying about the mask? You hate the masks too. Look, the point is we're on your side. We hate stuff and so do you. So just pass this around and say there's a rubber room. But when parent activist Megan Rafalski described to radio hosts on WMAL radio what she described sounded like a version of that. The rubber room without access to instruction, arm twisting and coercion. She choked back tears describing what the district's mask mandate has done to her elementary schooler. Should probably be pointed out. She claimed her son was sequestered in the principal's office and that she was forced to wait for him outside in the cold. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep it together. Rafalski told, not Rafalka, but Rafalski, told the hosts of O'Connor and Company on WMAL, but we've gotten to a point, it's unbelievable what they're doing to our kids. They won't let my son go to his classroom because he won't wear a mask, because he's exercising his rights, and they're forcing him to sit in the office. He's being strong-armed and intimidated by his principal and many others. She later told Loudoun Now that her son was, quote, clinically dismissed from school at noon over his refusal to wear a mask. The district spokesperson told HuffPost it doesn't comment on individual students. But Rafalski isn't just a random parent. She's the face of the district's anti-mask movement. That's earned her a guest appearance or two on Fox News alongside her family to argue that masks are, quote, ready for the super awesome scientific reason why you can't have masks? They're depriving the children of oxygen for their brain to be able to develop properly. There is, of course, no evidence that masks do that. So, anyway, if you take a look at the Loudoun Now article where she describes the situation, they too pretty much go through they do describe the process of what kids are doing if they show up without masks. Let's see. Here's more. So she's in Loudoun County. So they discussed the fact that the school board voted last Tuesday to support Superintendent Scott Ziegler continuing the mask requirement. Last night, Ziegler sent an email to families saying that maskless students would be considered close contacts of individuals who test positive for COVID-19. He said that maskless students would be required to quarantine for 10 days. One mother said that she felt the policy was punishment for not abiding by the mandate. Megan Rafalski, a mother of a Banneker elementary school student, said her son tried to enter the school building without his mask this morning, which I'm sure he was thrilled about being asked to do, and he was sent to the library instead of to class. Now that's interesting, right? Rafalski and other parents asked the principal to allow their children to go to class without masks. He said, you either come in and put a mask on or they need to go home, Rafalski said. It was extremely upsetting. My son was perfectly healthy today. He needs to be in class. That's why he is in school. Now, pointing out here, in Loudoun Now, what happened to your son when he wasn't wearing a mask? Well, he was sent to the library. And that's sad because it isn't class. Okay, well, now we're moving you to a bigger forum. You're on WMAL radio, and it's being recorded, and maybe the Daily Caller would be interested in taking a recording of our interview with you and circulating it in their right-wing nutosphere. Tell us again what happened to your son. He was being forced to sit in the principal's office. He's being strong-armed. That's interesting. You told Loudoun Now he was sent to the library? No, it was the principal's office where they're forcing him to do stuff. Did you say a rubber room with no access to instruction? I don't know. I can't even recall what I said. If you think that's what I said, then I guess you should run with it. And from there, poof. Anyway, later, the principal called the Rafalski family to share that their son was being clinically dismissed, whatever that means, go home. Rafalski picked her son up after noon. She said the family does not yet know what they will do tomorrow, but that he needs to be in school. No mention of having to wait outside in the cold or whatever, but I mean, if you have to wait outside of the building and it's cold out, yeah, they didn't say you had to take your shoes off and stand in the snow. Whatever. We're not against the people who want to wear the masks, but you cannot separate these kids, says one mother of two, Gloria George. I missed a small paragraph here. At Smarts Mill Middle School, administrators took a similar approach, dividing unmasked students from the student body. One mother of two, Gloria George, said her family decided it was best for them not to wear masks. We're not against people who do want to wear them, but you cannot separate these kids. Why not? George said that during recess, this is the only complaint that I've seen that has any merit so far, was that during recess, the student body played outside without masks on, but her son was still not permitted to join. I don't know why you wouldn't want to let them play outside without a mask on and then come back in. You still won't want to wear a mask. Go back to the library. Elsewhere, those opposed to the mask mandate took more abrasive approaches. Outside of Woodgrove High School, students wearing masks were reportedly called sheep by parents. Isn't that nice? That's the Woodgrove High School is where the picture was taken the other day, where I thought maybe that Glenn Youngkin was there for an event, but it turns out that he probably wasn't, and it was just the nasty people, one of whom kind of sort of looked like an older Marjorie Trader Green, I mentioned. That's where they were protesting. Remember, let them breathe, and parents' rights, the signs that they were holding. I don't know whether it was them or other protesters, but apparently they showed up to actually yell at the children because, the governor told them to act with love. So there they showed up to yell at them and call them sheep. Dozens of Woodgrove students were forced to spend the day in the auditorium if they did not put on a mask. Alicia Brand, one of the organizers of Maskless Monday at more than 30 Loudoun schools, said that Ziegler's Sunday email announcing the 10-day quarantine for maskless students was really a threat of suspension. The quarantine period for close contacts for people who test positive for the virus is now 5 days. So they were saying, well, doing it for 10 days is really a punishment. Although I will tell you that as a Loudoun County school parent, I got an email yesterday clarifying that no, the guidance from CDC is that if you are a close contact, you are to quarantine for 5 days, after which, if you are without symptoms, you can return to work or school with a well-fitting mask on. But if you refuse to wear a mask, then you have to wait 10 days before you return. And since we're talking about people who are refusing to wear masks, they have to go with the 10-day CDC guideline. It's not something that the school is imposing above and beyond what the CDC recommends. So that's a lie, too. Anyway, what this is doing, they complain, is creating two classes of students, the masked and the unmasked, and you're pitting them against one another, Brand said. It's not well thought out. There are two classes of students. That seems true. And masked and unmasked, yes, that's the dividing line. Pitting one against the other, don't see how it's happening. As a matter of fact, most students, probably the ones who are wearing masks, are probably like, I'd like to spend the whole day relaxing in the library, more comfortable seating, more generous leg room, and you can get up and walk around. And I can, I'd love to be assigned to a room like that to do my work remotely over the internet, as opposed to sitting here in class and trying not to fall asleep. I don't see what pitting anybody against anything. But, that's the only way it sounds like a tragedy, is if you say that they're pitted one against the other. When asked if the school division directed principals to segregate students not wearing masks, spokesman Wade Byard did not answer the question, but referred to the school board's vote to support continued masking. We are following the same guidelines as always, as outlined on the mask and mitigation section of our website. The school board affirmed its support for these guidelines last Tuesday. And that's all there is. Byard later reported that only 100 students in the division defied the mask mandate. 200 showed up without masks, 100 complied, 100 did not. So not an overwhelming number. 80,000 something students, and 100 of them decided to defy the mandates or defy the continuing mask mandate in the county and sat in the library as a result. What a tragedy. That's outrageous, right? Anyway, there was something else. Oh, yes. I opened up a piece I saw flying by on Twitter from The Hill. Just to put a finer point on it, most Virginia school districts are disobeying the Youngkin on his order on making masks optional, according to this report in The Hill. Sarakshi Rai reporting for The Hill. A majority now of Virginia public school districts are flouting Governor Glenn Youngkin's executive order that makes wearing masks optional for children in the state's schools, according to the Washington Post. In an analysis, the newspaper found that 2 days after the order took effect, 53% of the state's school districts are still requiring masks for all students, comprising 67% of the state's public school student population. The Post noted that the division in the state over the issue falls along partisan lines, as almost every district that complied with Youngkin's order voted for him in the 2021 gubernatorial election. Youngkin's office did not immediately respond to The Hill's request for comment. 7 Virginia school boards are suing in an effort to block the executive order. The plaintiffs are led by Fairfax County Public Schools, requesting an immediate injunction, which gives Virginia parents the authority to choose whether their children, an immediate injunction of Youngkin's order, which gives Virginia parents the authority to choose whether or not their children should wear face coverings in the classrooms. The school boards are arguing Youngkin's order violates a section of the state constitution. Youngkin slammed the school boards. No love for them, I guess, during an interview with conservative radio host John Fredericks on Monday, and said the districts aren't recognizing the rights of parents today. Oh, and by the way, they haven't been recognizing the rights of parents all along, so I'm not surprised. So, playing back to, well, I don't know. I have nothing here for us, so I'm going to just do my stump speech and leave it at that. But there you have it. 53% of all the school districts in the state say, to hell with you. The Constitution gives this right to us, and they happen to cover 67% of the school population in the state. 2/3 of the state is still going to school as though his mandate were never issued. So, anyway, that's it by the numbers. I just thought that was kind of an interesting variation on what you might be hearing about what's going on in Loudoun County in particular. You might have heard the story, rubber room with no access to instruction. No, entirely untrue. Look, they're doing their best to conflate the issue and make it sound like there's some persecution going on, but I'm not seeing it. But they figured it worked to lie about CRT. It worked to lie about transgender stuff, so maybe it'll work to lie about the mask things. Except, like I said, 2/3 of the state is having the opposite, making the opposite observation daily in schools. And the kids are going home and telling them what's happening. 2/3 of the state's population are hearing a completely different story. Anyway, speaking of school boards, then we can transition to the very weird story that made the rounds last night on Twitter. I believe I first saw it when Judd Legum circulated his tweet about it in his newsletter, and Judd is also the source for Greg's note about the issue in Mississippi. Last night I saw, because he very wisely used a graphic to catch my eye, his tweet about the McMinn County School Board in Tennessee having just voted to ban a Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel about the Holocaust, Maus, M-A-U-S, in case you don't know about it. And it's very famous. I know all that. I never read it, but I definitely have seen it, and I thought, oh, what an interesting concept in general. The vote was 10-0 to ban this book, and his follow-up to that is the one that Greg just sent me about a Mississippi mayor withholding $110,000 of funding from the Madison County library system until its libraries purge books with LGBTQ themes. The mayor calls the books, including an essay collection by Elton John and others, homosexual materials. So that gives you an idea of where he's coming from. By the way, one more argument in favor of Loudoun County not being the bigoted weird place full of reactionary weirdos that you might have come away with otherwise if some impression was entirely based on reading about the backlash supposedly taking place in Loudoun County. Again, not only did Loudoun County parents come out and say, yeah, you want to listen to us? We reject Glenn Youngkin out of hand. But I've just been recently in the library, at the public library near our place where we actually well, anyway, it doesn't really matter what I was doing there, does it? So I was there. I bring that up because I took note of the fact that I walked past the stacks, like in the first set of book stacks that you come to when you walk into the main room of the library, facing some of the seating, where people just sit down and read some books, and they put out, recommended books and new arrivals, etc. and stuff, and display it in there. And in the teen section, there were very definitely a couple of books prominently displayed as young adult stuff that definitely would qualify for the outrage of this particular Mississippi mayor that had LGBTQ themes. And good. I mean, I'm not, quibbling with their display or their circulation. I'm pointing out that even in the face of all of this political pressure to go the other direction, the Loudoun County Public Libraries are still saying, nope, this is our mission as a library, and yep, we're still putting this stuff out. No, this county is not actually filled with reactionaries swept off their feet by Glenn Youngkin's rhetoric. He lost this county, I remind you, again and again and again. And the public schools say F you on this mandate thing, and the public libraries say F you on the reactionary garbage down in Mississippi. It's not happening. They're not making a big deal of it yet here in Loudoun County. But given that everybody got the wrong impression of Loudoun County and what their politics really were over the transgender issues in the school, no, it hasn't made any change in the way the library approaches its mission either. So I just thought I'd point that out. Anyway, so Judd Legum's tweet from last night linked to a piece in the Tennessee Holler, which I don't know what exactly what it is, what kind of publication it is, but it's clearly political, at least, or they cover politics. I don't know whether it's a newspaper publication or whatever. And I also don't know why it's taking 20 minutes to load the site, but maybe everybody's reading this story because it's so unbelievable. Maybe I can read the pocket version of it while we're waiting for the Tennessee Holler to load up. I don't know what's holding it. Maybe they're under, attack or something. But, I guess the pocket version is going to become impossible too. All right. Well, at any rate, it was very interesting, their telling of the story. It's annoying that they're difficult to load. Maybe the site is overloaded. Everybody is racing off to read the story. But basically, the graphic novel that we're talking about, Mouse, ended up being opposed by the various school board members, though there were some people apparently speaking in favor of it. There's no video of the event, apparently, according to the Tennessee Holler, but the Holler linked to the minutes of the meeting, which actually appear to be more like a transcript than, a summary like minutes. Anyway, argument going back and forth about this thing. And apparently, if you were wondering, like if you've read Mouse, maybe you're familiar with it. I'm not that familiar with the actual content of it, but the complaint was, they used foul language. They cuss words, as they like to say, I guess, in Tennessee. In particular, they were troubled by the use of the words goddamn, which is about as mild as the cuss words get. But okay, technically, it's bad news, I guess, if you're anti-cuss word. But that also, at some point, there was a depiction of a nude female body. Now, I don't know in what context. Remember, though, this is a Holocaust retelling, so it might be that you were talking about nude females who had been stripped by Nazi death camp guards for their extermination, which is just an actual historical fact that's bothering them. But, they played the aw shucks country folk kind of position on this and saying, well, now we have an anti-cuss word policy in our schools, don't we? And okay, technically, I guess they do. So a kid who was walking through the halls saying these GD words would be presumably stopped and subject to discipline under the policy. And I guess that's possibly true in McMinn County, Tennessee. Kind of a waste of time, at least particularly for someone saying goddamn, but, we'll borrow from Rudy. I'm not allowed to say goddamn no more. So you're not allowed to do it in McMinn County either, or McMinn County. And so they pointed out, so now if a kid said this, they would be in trouble. Even if they were reading aloud from a curriculum textbook, they would be in trouble. So what's the story here? Why should a book that's included in our curriculum hand them words that we have a policy against? And it's like, there's almost a point in there if you really squint and look at it. But then the other thing, so these people, their point, to the extent that they could be said to have one, was, well, you don't need this stuff in order to teach about the Holocaust. You don't have to use the words goddamn in order to teach about the Holocaust accurately. And you don't have to have, I guess, you don't have to show pictures of people stripped naked, even though in this case this was a cartoon stripped naked, but whatever. But you don't have to necessarily have that as part of the content. You could certainly say that it was true and it did happen this way. That's this guy's thing. But then, then they're getting into, well, the practical story here is this is part of our planned curriculum module. And if we strip away this book, then the whole module falls apart and we don't have materials to teach kids about the Holocaust. And they say, well, got some other ones. All right, whatever. But the thing is, I don't know that they're ever going to be able to get anything else that's going to satisfy people. And I bring it up to bring you over to this. At some point, you got to read through an awful lot of really just terrible, annoying, stupid comments being made among the members of the school board and others in opposition to this book. But if you read far enough down, you're going to get to this part where one of the school board members, Mike Cochran, says, I've found some other stuff that I want to get rid of. This is a constant problem. It's not just this mouse thing. There's lots of problems. And for instance, he brings up this one example, which is just about the most amazing thing ever. If you saw me tweeting about it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen me tweet about it, you're just going to be astonished. I'm going to jump down here to, page 11 of the 20 pages of the minutes that are linked again in the Tennessee Holler piece, if you can get through to it. And he goes on to say, we don't need this stuff to teach kids history. We can teach them history and we can teach them graphic history. We can tell them exactly what happened, but we don't need all the nakedness and all the other stuff. Oh my God. But worse. There's worse. It's not like this is the only book that comes up. Ooh, there's more. Again, every 2 to 3 months I get something. I had a poem, again, 7th and 8th grade, sent to me. And then there's a little bickering about whether it's 7th or 8th grade, which is kind of a funny thing. Somebody else says, Mike, we're dealing with 8th grade. Well, that's what this is, 8th grade. Yeah, but you said 7th and 8th grade. Well, 7th and 8th grade. Well, we're dealing with 8th grade. All right, 8th grade. And then somebody else says, well, the poem, teachers, help me out. Is this poem in the 8th grade book? Well, no, ma'am, it's in the 7th grade, and it's a poem we don't even do. At which point, then he says, all right, well, he doesn't bother saying it, but okay, then I think I meant 7th grade rather than 8th grade. The bickering doesn't help us anyway. But guess what the poem is? First of all, the poem isn't a poem. Second of all, I don't even know what they're doing with this as a poem. It's song lyrics, but get this, he doesn't... Okay, it's a 7th grade, and it's a poem we don't even do. And he says, well, that doesn't even matter. It's in the curriculum. Like, you skipped this poem. I don't care that you don't teach this poem. It's in the book, and kids could find it. And it's filthy and disgusting. And what is it? It doesn't matter. It's in the curriculum, and this stuff keeps popping up. So I want to read it. You guys can fire me later, I guess, because of how filthy and disgusting it is. Are you ready for this? Okay, hold on to your seats. It is disgusting. I don't want to disturb any. Warning, trigger warning. This could make you think I'm reading you pornography here. Are you ready for this filthy, disgusting teen anthem in this book that's so objectionable? Here we are. I'll read it to you as a poem. I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. The heavenly blisses of his kisses fill me with ecstasy. Now, of course, you could think maybe this is LGBTQ content. Well, no, the speaker is female, I think pretty clearly in all of this. He's sweet, just like chocolate candy, just like honey from the bee. Oh, I am just wild about Harry, and he's just wild about me. Now, you'll recognize it, of course, perhaps not, because it's from 100 million years ago. It's I'm Just Wild About Harry, from a musical, Shuffle Along, as it happens. I looked it up to check it out. Written in 1921, your filthy grandparents and great-grandparents, obviously, getting off to the hot lyrics. He continues on to tell you what the objection is, by the way. One of the discussion questions is to define what the word ecstasy means. That, by the way, if you were looking for what was the objectionable word, it was ecstasy. I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. The heavenly blisses of his kisses fill me with ecstasy. And oh my God, the kids need to know. Remember when it was, what are we going to tell our children about the Star Report and the president? They're going to ask questions. Kids are going to ask, what's ecstasy? My problem is, all the way through this literature, we expose these kids to nakedness. We expose them to vulgarity. You go all the way back to first grade, second grade, and they are reading books that have a picture, and this, I'd love to know what this one is, a picture of a naked man riding a bull. I don't know what that is, so love to find out. He says, it's not vulgar, it's something you'd see in an art gallery, but it's unnecessary. Teachers put tape over the guy's butts, he goes on to say. Oh my God.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
So, I don't know, I'll wind up with this. He starts with, I'm just wild about Harry, and ends with, my problem is it looks like the entire curriculum is developed to normalize sexuality, nudity, and vulgar language. If I was trying to indoctrinate somebody's kids, this is how I would do it. With 1921's Shuffle Along. You bet.